Star Citizen's planets are big, and they're pretty detailed, but for a long time players have been asking, what is there to actually do on these planets? How are you going to make them for so many star systems, and why can't I drive 10 feet without hitting a rock? These are not trivial questions. Star Citizen's next planet tech update, powered by Genesis, CIG's in-house new planet generation suite, aims to use machine learning based on data from Earth and Luna to add some pretty ridiculous new levels of detail to a larger number of planets faster. It's poised to create truly dense forests, logically scattered rocks, thunderstorms, points of interest, swamps, and even plants that will change with the seasons. And some of it is actually closer than you might think to being in-game, according to one of the leads on the project, Ali Brown. And the most important thing about this Planet Tech update is, beyond the visuals, this is actually going to impact your gameplay quite a bit. Today I'm going to summarize what's coming soon and what's coming far for planets in Star Citizen. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. So recently, Ali Brown, the Senior Director of Graphics and Planet Tech at CIG, gave an update on progress towards the next step in Planet Tech. He gave a rough answer about 75% of the way to that next milestone, but that doesn't really tell us much, just that they've been making progress. But from his other messages in the thread and CitizenCon last year, we can determine a lot of what's involved in this first update, named the Laws of Nature. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Planets will soon be made using a larger parameter of rules to define the locations of plants, trees, rocks, animals, rivers, lakes, caves, and nature. These rules will be data-driven, using real-world examples, and will fundamentally change the way the planets look. Up until now, planetary surfaces were determined by two factors: temperature and humidity. With Planet Tech V5, planets will take into account the geological properties, the soil type, the soil depth, and even the sunlight levels at that specific spot. All of this to determine the foliage type. So you'll end up with pines, swamps, tundra, and everything in between depending on your distance from the sun and your location on the globe. But that's not all that's changing in the dynamics of planetary scattering. Rocks will now spawn more logically around cliffs and mountains rather than uniformly across the entire planet's surface. And if you go out into the valleys and the normal areas on the planet, you will see that there are much less rocks scattered about. All of these assets, including the ground cover, can be adjusted by using just a single shader that they've built that changes to reflect multiple variables that will factor into the shader, rather than creating a unique asset for every single possible combination of these different variables. A large part of this update is to make sure things don't feel random anymore, and places don't look the same just because they've met the criteria of temperature and humidity. That is also helped by the solutions they've come up with for density and foliage scattering, which, to be honest, is giving the campers among us a lot more to enjoy, with the amount of trees and locations like Microtech set to skyrocket with this update. This increase in performance is part of the reason that new biomes are also starting to show up on these videos, but we'll take a look at those in a bit as they're coming later. For now, the density and scattering of these assets and the unique nature of their biomes are the main focus. This is also possible, though, because of some major improvements on the rendering side of the game. For starters, the CPU is not handling as much of the work anymore, which is a relief to many. The rendering will be able to utilize many cores now, specifically making much more use of the GPU. They can also now cache the terrain, which has vastly improved the pop-up that happens across planet surfaces as you're entering atmosphere. This is due to hitting much higher resolutions on the ground textures. Better tiling is also occurring on the macro level when looking at the ground, so you don't see that repetitive pattern whenever you're down on foot. All of this will do wonders for the looks and atmosphere of Star Citizen, but what makes this Planet Tech update better than the ones that have come before is that it has a pretty substantial impact on gameplay. As with many things, Star Citizen, only believe this when you see it. But these changes are hitting some of the biggest problems with planets that players have had. Driving ground vehicles should be heavily improved, with players being able to more easily follow clear paths of terrain reliably. It makes the use of ground vehicles, where you land to offload them, and where you might want to put down a base, much more strategic, and all of those things are pretty important to the game in its current state of development. As much as it triggers people to hear the word, exploration also heavily relies on predictability and clear storytelling. Being able to understand where a certain harvestable might spawn adds one more opportunity for explorers to flex their knowledge. Players will also have an easier time surveying the planet's surface from above and landing in a location that looks like just what they were expecting when they were 400 kilometers away. Seasons mean that trees will lose their leaves, potentially adding to or taking away from active cover in combat scenarios, and maybe even the harvestables you can find around you. Outposts and points of interest will farm different crops based on their locations, possibly resulting in different contracts, supplies, or tasks being provided at those locations. On the performance side of things, I don't think I need to explain to anybody how the repetition of assets, the tiling across the ground, the stuttering of planetary rendering, and the pop-in on approach will naturally improve the gameplay. Denser forests and longer draw distances are the kind of obvious improvements people expect without really considering the gameplay implications. But these optimizations and improvements aren't the end goal. They are what will pave the way, though, for the more significant changes coming to Planet Tech in the near future. See, this is only phase 1 of the 6-part Genesis rollout. There is a lot more to look forward to in the longer-term lead-up to 1.0 and our first 5-star systems. Just like in the first part of this update, there's actually a lot of performance enhancements coming our way. The team is working on global illumination in the game, which in outdoor environments should be pretty noticeable with an immense amount of environmental probes. Sound is also a big part of this suite of tools. These obviously aren't exclusive to planets, but they're part of the update nonetheless. The audio engine within Star Citizen has been undergoing a major overhaul over the last few years, and it's expected that with the new design, not only will we have improved quality of sound delivery, but it will physicalize sound as well. Shockwaves will now propagate based on the atmosphere. Realistic audio will be able to play when you're in vacuum. And a systemic Doppler effect will be noticeable as you move around the game. Dynamic weather aims to upgrade what we already experience in-game now: wind, sand, snow, and rain. These elements will dynamically roam the planet, kicking up storms and changing conditions, threatening lightning, throwing off telemetry, and covering the ground in water. And they should be predictable and trackable by players as they move across the globe in a less predetermined way than what they were before. While we recently did get rain and moving storms in the game, I believe there's still progress to be made. As I mentioned before, with so many new variables to plant growth and terrain generation, the art team is needing to keep up on expanding what they can design. Swamps will include floating foliage and a wide array of the types of plants you'd find in those more humid locations. Jungles will do largely the same, but with less humidity and more tall trees. Forests aim to absolutely dwarf not just the existing trees we have, but a lot of different ships in the game. All of these absolutely benefit from the raised performance ceiling and scattering improvements we talked about earlier. And the big one, Starchitect, an initiative to place points of interest across planetary surfaces that pull from various libraries of different architectural styles. Paint them in various faction themes and levels of quality, and locate them, logically, based on their use case and need. This is the location tool equivalent of that massive web of factions and guilds they made before at CitizenCon. While the missions team needs to figure out how to procedurally generate missions across the game, and the AI team has to fill them with believable characters, Ian and his team need to make a tool that can use a list of variables to make believable locations across planetary surfaces. Every place will have an owner, or maybe a derelict. They will have a function, and the potential for new contracts or items to be found. Obviously, we'll need a much better loot table than we have now. Because, to be honest, the overall expectation they have set for this is pretty insane. With thousands of potential locations on just one side of a planet, it sounds like too much to handle, too much to fulfill. And honestly, along with Quantum Boost, this does seem to relieve them of hurdles to make planets larger. But we'll see what happens, and I'll keep you updated on how it's going. Finally, all these planets are still going to need things to do and people to meet, and the last part of this update is AI. allowing AI to better perceive their surroundings, whether they are changing due to light, due to vehicle movement, due to terrain destruction, and just in general. We still don't have a ton of AI locomotion on planets, and it seems this update is maybe aimed at making that much easier to implement, which seems to be the general purpose of the first phase in this overhaul of planets. Get everything initially ready for the big stuff. For years, Star Citizen's planets have looked amazing, but we've had problems with content and optimization. While I don't think this Genesis suite is going to fix every single problem, it is clearly aimed at them. This first phase looks to be heavy on optimization rather than points of interest, weather, or new biomes, but less rock scatter, denser, more believable forests, and logically extremely diverse asset and harvestable scattering is probably going to have definitive improvements on everyday gameplay. So I think it's still pretty exciting for the average player. All that being said, Ali did confirm this will roll out with one planet first, and I would assume this would be Microtech. So even when they do start rolling this out, expect it to be the standard slow CIG rollout that slowly adds more as it goes. This has hopefully given you a pretty good understanding of what's coming in Planetech in the near and far term. I don't know when Phase 1 will roll out, hopefully by the end of this year, but I'm not crossing my fingers anymore. They hurt. If you'd like more regular news, updates, and explanations of how Star Citizen works in your feed, consider subscribing here and hitting the bell. As CIG's messaging has changed this year, so have my videos a bit, and I realize that means YouTube does not suggest them to the same people. Thank you so much though for tuning into this video. I hope you learned something new in it, and I'll catch you in the next.